Welcome to the Upland Nation podcast. Scott Linden here. Glad you could join me. Fascinating discussion to take place with one of the, I'll call him one of the new legends in dog training, especially versatile dog training. Clyde Vetter of Sharpshooters Kennels in Wisconsin will be joining me today on the show. If you don't know the name, you're probably not a NAVDA kind of guy or gal, but Clyde probably has placed more prize one utility dogs in the NAVDA testing system than anybody. On top of that, he's got some great ideas for us about testing, but also training, of course, because that's what it's all about for us. Clyde's also an inveterate bird hunter, waterfowl, and upland, among other things, and has lots of wisdom to bestow upon we unworthy subjects. So that'll be coming up real soon. We'll also talk, I'll tell you more about that in a minute. Pad care, especially as hunting season approaches. Yeah, there are some things we should be doing now that will help our dogs last another day or more in the field. So that'll be our handle it topic this week. And then also I asked you for advice on introducing a new dog to the pack at home, and got some great insights there. So if you're doing anything along those lines or considering it, some great advice. And if you just got a pup, for example, there may be some things in there for you as well. And it's all made possible by Sage and Breaker, Pointer Shotguns, Mid-Valley Clays and Shooting School, TrulockChokes Tubes, MidwayUSA.com, Purina Pro Plan Sport, LandTrust.com, and ESPAmerica.com. Well, it's been a busy couple, 3 weeks around here, I'll say. Been on the road a lot, so not doing much in the way of training, getting back into that now, of course. Cooler temperatures mean more miles for both of us. Flick is free running most of the time. Got some great advice I was at Purina for about a day and a half. Learned a heck of a lot from everybody down there. Got to rub elbows with a lot of folks who, as you know more about this stuff than me. So we're doing a little bit more conditioning, a lot of free running, and another road trip to Midway USA. Got to spend much of a day with Larry Potterfield, the founder. We'll be talking about that in an exclusive interview coming down the pike in a week or two, so stand by for that. Anyway, temperatures below 50 degrees around here. Everybody feels better, and even the wildfire smoke is a little bit less dense than it was when I left the last time. All right, so on the social media, I asked for your best advice on introducing a new dog to the home and to the pack. Yeah, when you just have one dog coming in and there's nobody there besides that dog, things are pretty easy. I know, except for all that other stuff. But crate training, etc. But if you already have a dog or more than one dog in the household, then, you know, most of the time you need to be a little bit circumspect in how you do that. Following that phenomenon very closely with several friends of mine right now, we're bringing pups into the household, and thought everybody might benefit from some of the wisdom of some of their colleagues out there in the social media world who listen to the Upland Nation podcast. The answers, Brian Kenny has a good one. Time and patience. Take it slow. Deal with the inconveniences for a while. Yeah, do not rush the relationship. Joe Rundell makes a good point. At feeding time, feed the older dog first. Yeah, I get it. There are all sorts of things. And actually, the thread running through a lot of your answers is dogs are insecure to begin with. So if a young dog or a new dog of any age comes into the house, the current resident may feel a little threatened from a security standpoint, psychologically. So if you go with that in mind, that might help a little bit. Lance Larson has a lot of great tips. Introduce dogs on a neutral ground, a park or a field where they can run and get to know each other. we'll get deeper into some of his experiences in a moment. Thanks, Lance, for all your answers. Hey, man, I'm looking at your cigar box guitar right now, so thanks so much for it. I enjoy taking it off the wall and picking around with it every once in a while. Eric Kopang is kind of in the same wheelhouse I am. Keep them separated at first, able to see and smell each other across a room, maybe those baby gates between rooms, something like that, but don't let them physically interact. Then shift one gate, then allow them to share yard time together. Yes, good advice. A lot of people are suggesting also keep a close eye on these dogs when they're interacting, and believe me, from experience myself, that is absolutely true. Brian Woodford, lots of exercise, lots of direction at feeding. There's that feeding thing again. Lots of attention to both dogs. Enforce regimens and training. Yep, absolutely. Let's see. Gary Brycemeister, I think I'm saying it right, Gary. Check me on that. Be cautious. Watch over the new dog. Don't hold the new dog, he says, while you bring it in to meet the others. They don't feel like they can retreat if they need to. So put them on the ground, let each other sniff or whatever, but be ready. I might add to that, Gary, maybe both dogs on leashes, very loose leashes, and everybody on their guard, if you will. And then Lance, thanks for that great photo. Lance Larson put a photo in with his post, his comment. Even if you do everything right, the old dog will take a week or more to accept the new addition. So the old one's up on the couch, the little tiny one, and these are two Weimaraners, and it's so cute. The little tiny one is at the foot of the couch. Probably the best place for a subservient young dog. Yeah, so thanks, Lance. Thanks, everybody, for your advice and your pictures. They're always good. Follow us at Wingshooting USA on Facebook, or at the Upland Nation, of course, on Facebook as well. So thank you all for helping out in that regard. And that part of the show brought to you by Mid-Valley Clays and Shooting School. Everybody there who instructs, who is behind the counter, who is walking around, making sure everything's going well on the clays courses, is a hunter. Yeah, sure, they know how to break targets as well, and they do it very well. But they're also hunters, so they know what can help you. Whether it's instruction or buying a new gun, call Dave Fiedler. Go to midvalleyclays.com. Call Dave before you pull the trigger, so to speak, on your new gun purchase. Dave is a hunter, champion clay target shooter. He knows some things about hunting guns that we don't. And he can also get some of those really hard-to-get shotguns. He'll ship anywhere. Start with a phone call. Consult with him on what you're really looking for and what might solve your shooting problems. MidValleyClays.com. And a nice comment from one of our listeners a while back. He said, I've listened to the show for a long, long time. It was getting ready for this season. Realized I needed a couple new choke tubes. Took your advice, went to TrulockChokes.com. Everything about that transaction was seamless. From the ordering process to the identification process, shipping, the whole thing worked well. Thanks, Randy, for your comments, by the way, and good luck this season. All of that is due to Scott Trulock's leadership, putting things together, making sure that they are taking care of their customers. I can't tell you how important that is in this day and age. If you've dealt with anybody in the world of online retail or even brick and mortar retail, you know how important that is. Go to TrulockChokes.com, find your next choke tubes. And as I mentioned, I was over at Midway USA last week. Incredible place. What a philosophy. You know, every door at every building, the sidewalk in front of it has a list of the ideals of the company founder, Larry Potterfield, and everybody who works there is evaluated on those ideals. It's all the stuff you would do if you were running a company to take care of people like us, and it works. You know, I went through the incredible high-tech distribution center and was impressed with all sorts of aspects of it. It's about as modern as you can get. I said to my friend Adam, who was running the tour, I said, you know, if Gene Roddenberry didn't start Star Trek series, he would have designed this building. That's how cool it is. But Adam pointed something out to me that is important to you, and that is if you place your order before 3 p.m. Central Time, it's out the door and on the way to you that day. That's how efficient they are. Learn more about what they've got for you, and it's just about everything for shooting, hunting, and the outdoors at MidwayUSA.com. Well, it's been a couple weeks since I saw him, and we had the chance to get to know each other a little bit better. But now we're all going to get to know him a lot better. Clyde Vetter runs Sharpshooters Kennel. They're in Wisconsin. This guy is he knows how to run dogs. Tested over 300 dogs, qualified most of them. Let's see, 75% with a prize 1 or a prize 2 in the NAVDA system. Clyde Vetter, welcome to the Upland Nation podcast.
Thanks, Scott. Good to be here.
You know, I could go on and on. I had a long list of your other accomplishments, but as I think you finish all your emails with, you have a line underneath your phone number that I think sums things up. And this is probably a great reason to ask about it. So tell me what it says there.
It says, let success make the noise.
Amen to that. I wish more people would buy into it. But you're one of those guys. Versatile champions galore. You're looked up to by so many people, and that was the genesis of this podcast interviewing one of your acolytes, Jake Bartels, a while back, who could say nothing but good things about you. And
Jake's a great guy.
He is, and he attributes a lot of his success in dog training to you. So I said, my God, I've run into this guy for more than 15 years at Pheasant Fest and other events, and we've never even had a conversation per se. So here
we said hi and bye and chatted for a minute or two, and that's about it.
I'm embarrassed, but it's been a summer of apologies for me. I've been saying that to so many people on the podcast. So, good. I'll just tick this one off my bucket list when we're done here.
All right.
Let's talk about the important stuff. What is it about bird dogs that really gets your juices flowing?
Well, I grew up in a hunting family, and I've been hunting since I was I was actually so little. My brother would actually take me with him when he was trapping, and they're the ones that kind of got me into waterfowl hunting. And so I started waterfowl hunting by about 8 years of age. My brother would take me along everywhere. And I actually owned a couple of labs and water spaniels when I was young. And we got into, Marilyn was going to college, and we ended up getting another lab, and it just wasn't really clicking for me. And we ended up talking to the breeder, and he was more than happy to take that pup back. And we ended up getting a short hair. And that was in '89, and man, we've just never looked back. And I fell in love with the pointing dogs and being outside and watching them run. And that's why I love hunting prairie birds so much, is I just absolutely love watching the dogs work together. And 2 or 3 people running dogs at the same time, and all of them working together. And it's been a big part of my life.
I can't agree more. That's what got me into the game, was watching a dog do their thing in the field. It is magic that you can't find anywhere else. Absolutely. And I'm glad to hear that you're of like mind. And so many others are as well. In fact, I had a conversation with somebody, Ben Jones from the Rough Grouse Society a couple of weeks ago.
Yep.
Great guy, going down the path in a lot of great ways for the organization. But I asked him, how do we get people involved and more interested in conservation? He said, well, you know the answer to that. The dogs.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it's always been it actually kind of amazes me that really only 4% of upland bird hunters belong to an organization or a conservation organization of sort. And it's been like, now that I found that out in the last year or two, now that Maryland's a lot more involved, it's really been boggling my mind as to why don't people feel the way I feel? Why aren't people stepping up to the plate to preserve the things that we love so much? And, I don't have the answer for that yet, but I'm certainly been trying to find it. And, I'm gearing a little bit more of my work and my mental status into that as to figuring out, how can we get more people involved in the conservation and the game and, just get more people involved so that we can save our love of the sport.
Absolutely. And we can talk about that in a moment. But if you all listening are wondering, yes, the last name is the same as that person I had on the podcast a couple weeks ago, Marilyn Vetter. Clyde and Marilyn are married. They run their training kennel. Marilyn, of course, now is the CEO at Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever. Been involved in that side of things in many, many ways over the years. Clyde in maybe a less visible version of the same thing, as he'll admit, staying below the radar in a lot of times.
Yeah.
But absolutely right, Clyde. So how would you want us to do better at that? I mean, you've given it thought. For all I know, you're, that's the kind of thing you talk about when Marilyn comes home at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah, I just think, the first step obviously is get involved, become a member. And that way you can see what all these organizations, whether it's Pheasants Forever, Quail Forever, Rough Grouse Society, another big one that I believe in is Sportsman's Alliance and Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. There's just so many of them out there, and Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, and I'm life members of all of them. But and then another one a lot of people don't think about, which is my love, is the grouse, the prairie grouse birds. So Wisconsin Sharptail Association and Minnesota Sharptail Association, and there's just so many of them out there. But pick one to start with, and maybe pick the one that is your true love, whether it's rough grouse or quail or whatever it may be, and just join that organization and see what it gives you and try and give back, whether it's in a local chapter. And the local chapters have so many things going on, and they do so much for all of our conservation and all the birds, the game birds, that, just stepping up to the plate is the first step.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've had many conversations while debating the merits of various Irish whiskeys with Maryland's predecessor. And what I would add to that is, if you're already a member, upgrade your membership one step. How hard is that? It's just a few more bucks once a year. And that in itself is a significant step. But talking to Howard Vincent, Maryland's predecessor at PF, we would talk about how, as you pointed out, how many more waterfowlers are a member of Ducks Unlimited, for example, than uplanders are of Pheasants Forever or whatever.
For sure.
And how do we do that is a question we'll be asking for the rest of our lives. Yeah. But simple steps like that, even just joining the local NAVDA chapter in a way is a step in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's so much that a person can do, but if we don't start really taking a hard look at it, some of our lands and game birds are just going to keep dwindling like they have been. Yeah.
Well, we could dwell on this the whole time, but what we're here to talk about is something way way more cogent for this discussion and this podcast, and that is bird dogs and bird hunting. So tell me, you have a chance, especially with your reputation and your incredible string of dogs, to go anywhere and hunt anything, anytime. But I think I know where I'll probably run into you next come this September.
Yeah, that would be Montana and South Dakota. I love chasing prairie grouse. I love chickens and sharptails and huns. And so, yeah, we're headed off. First of all, I have an archery hunt in Wyoming that I drew a tag for, which is another love of mine. I have way too many hobbies, and we could get into all of that. But, yeah, I'm going to go chase some mule deer with a good friend of mine, Ralph, and then we come back and I retool, and then we're going to head to Montana and then South Dakota and then some North Dakota bird hunting, and then we'll end up for a couple of weeks down in Arizona again.
What is it about those prairie birds? Because we could talk about this for the entire length of the podcast too, but I promise everybody we won't. We will talk dog training. What is it about that part of our game that you like so much?
Well, I think, it's a couple of things. I have a lot of clients that have never hunted sharptail or chickens, and they get out there and they start doing it, and they call me and they're really struggling with it. But they can be a little bit of a challenging bird to find, as far as where to hunt them and when to hunt them at the time of the day. Where will they be at the time of the day is when it's hot or if it's windy. And if it's, they can be a little bit challenging to find them sometimes. But when you do figure out where they are, and that can change a little bit from year to year, it's just, for me, it's that's part of the hunt, is the challenge of actually figuring out where they're at that time of the year, because that changes with crops and bugs and everything that they eat. So the challenge is finding them, where they sit in that time of the day. And then, I love watching the dogs roll out there in the prairies. You don't have to be concerned about them getting into the woods or, losing them or anything. That you can just see them. And I love watching a dog go out and point up on a hilltop a couple hundred yards away, another one coming in and backing them. And then, Marilyn and I circling around and getting into shooting position. And it's just, there's nothing like it, watching them dogs standing tall and proud in them prairies. And then them birds, either early season popcorning, as they're flying up, and then hoping that there's a straggler or two there. And then, later in the fall, obviously they start getting covered up and jumping a little bit more as a group. But it's just, I don't know. It's always been a passion of mine. It's one of the birds that I've always loved to go after.
Amen to all of that. And you're absolutely right. I like you, and you said it so well. And I was thinking about it this morning, running my one dog. I love being able to see him at 200, 300, 400 yards without a tree in the way. That goes way back to when we climbed out of trees as a species and started roaming the savanna. To me, the prairies of sharptail country are much like the African savanna. A little bit more topography, but much the same. And there's something primordial in that. So
yeah.
Well, we'll talk more about that as we get into it. But for this first half of the podcast, I really wanted to dwell on some of the things that are important to all of us who, especially those listening to this podcast, dog training in general, but in particular steadiness.
Okay.
So let's talk a little bit about how to get a dog. And granted, we all have a different definition of what a finished dog is. Mm-hmm. But at some point, we got to get a dog to hold still.
Correct.
For how long? We'll debate that down the road. But it starts.
Well, I lost the dog in the Invitational a couple of years ago because the fields were so tall and we couldn't find him for 15 minutes. But he was still standing there, and actually, I got a VC on that dog. And but yeah, we end up teaching them to hold, for as long as they need to.
Amen to that. I had a similar situation in South Dakota in cattails. And when I finally found him, he was pointing a raccoon. Mm-hmm. Everybody survived.
Well, it's better that he pointed it than otherwise.
Absolutely. So walk me through it. Granted, we can't go into the details because that's what we would hire you to do with our dog. But let's start from a puppy. And what are the major milestones, and how are you trying to reach those?
Okay. Well, there's some things that I do very differently, and the reason I do them very differently is because I did them the way a lot of other people do and a lot of other trainers do, and I realized I was actually hindering or hurting my dogs.
Yeah.
Both in their mental capacity and then also in their style, and that was by using check cords, and then even with puppies. So I personally, I'm not a check cord guy, and many people know that if they show up training with me and they pull out a check cord, I pull out my knife and I cut it up into leash sizes. And the reason for that, Scott, is I've seen so many dogs ruined by check cords. I've actually, honestly, and this is my truth, and that's just because I've lived it, is I've actually had to fix more dogs that have been ruined by check cords than with e-collars.
Wow.
And the reason for that is, and I'm going to lay into this a little bit because I find that this is a big one, and you see it at a lot of different training days and stuff where people put their puppies on a check cord. And let's just think about this. They put their puppy on a check cord and they walk them into a bird on the downwind side, and the puppy naturally is going to hold point. It's going to point, but it's going to flash point. And it's going to look like a statue for just several seconds, right? And then what's going to happen, the guy's going to get his buddy to come in and start, getting ready to flush the bird. Well, the puppy's starting to tug and pull, and he's dancing around on his feet, and he's pulling and tugging, and he's dancing on his feet. And so the actual time that he looks like a statue is maybe, 5 to 10 seconds. And the amount of time that he's dancing around and tugging and pulling on point is probably 20 or 30 seconds. So, and then they'll flush the bird, and then they might let the puppy chase. I mean, everybody does some things a little differently. So what we're teaching that dog to do around birds is to dance and tug and pull and not look like a statue. So I always just make sure I've got really good flying birds, and I put them in light enough grass so that when the puppy decides it wants to pounce in on it, it's not going to catch it. And even if it does catch a few birds, these dogs are so resilient anymore that it's not going to hurt them. Just make sure you got good flying birds and teach that puppy that he's got to look like a statue. So that's one of my big stepping stones there that I've learned with training my pups and clients' dogs. And then as soon as I got that puppy, I should say, to where it's pointing birds and I'm firing the cap pistol and then starting to shoot the shotgun, which is, I move along that pretty quickly because I couldn't tell you the last time that I've seen anybody raise a dog that was mentally unstable to where it was, ended up being gun shy and that sensitive. We just don't see that much anymore in our breeds. So once I got that puppy to where I'm shooting birds over it, I automatically switched to release traps. And once I'm switched to release traps, then I go ahead and start creating what I call wild bird situations.
Yeah.
And so I call them wild bird situations because I'm trying to simulate, especially sharptail. We used to, take our dogs up on sharptail in the summers when we lived back in North Dakota. And that's kind of where I adapted some of it from. If a puppy or a young dog starts to encroach on those sharptail, they're not hanging around at all, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when they're not hanging around at all, then that's teaching that dog to back off on those birds. So I switched to release traps. And as soon as that dog takes, establishes point and then takes a step towards that trap, I pop that bird and make them realize that they're the ones that pushed it. So I take all the human element out of it as far as me putting check cord. It's one of my pet peeves when I see people run a check cord on a puppy or a dog and then bring them into a release trap when that's what the release trap button is for. But I understand people have budgets. They can't afford the number of birds that myself or my clients do. I mean, because my 6-month-old dogs have probably been on, close to 150 birds by the time they're 6 months of age.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's a vast difference. And, when I have people come in here training, they'll see the amount of birds that we go through in a day, and it blows their mind. And I've heard it many times that, if a friend asks another friend, hey, you want to come train in that Clyde? They say, I can't afford it.
Yeah.
And so I get it. It becomes a budget issue. So that's where putting little tags on pigeons or strings to keep them not flying so they can keep reusing the birds and stuff. I get that there's a budget issue, but when it comes to my success and, the success of my clients that I help them train, I got to do things as wild as I can just to create that natural way of training. So, yeah, I go to release traps then. And with the release traps, I just, and I think Jake talked about this quite a bit in your podcast as far as how I, once I pop a bird and they'll chase it some, that dog, after being on so many birds, they're more than likely going to come back and repoint that trap.
Yeah.
So I'll have somebody reloading it quickly while I get that dog back, and they'll come back and repoint it, and I may pop it again. If not, I'll have some birds in my bag, and they just learn that they actually start self-steadying themselves, and they always look like a statue when they come back and point, but they always start self-steadying themselves because they realize they're not going to get nothing out of it. And then I'll just shoot every 6th to 8th one, and just to keep that interest there. But then, it doesn't take but a few days, and that dog's actually just naturally steady until the shot's fired.
That is so funny. I was relating to Jake, but had a situation where I wasn't using a release trap. My covey rises come out of an old milk crate that I tip over. I heard that.
And
my dog came right back. He knew he'd done wrong. He broke the rules.
Yeah.
Came all the way back and pointed the milk crate. Just to make sure.
Yeah. So I use a duck launcher with several birds in it for that same thing. But, getting back to the multiple flushes on. So one of the things that so many people do wrong is, when the dog breaks, or once they got a dog, more steadied, and the dog breaks, they'll scold it, they'll set it back, they'll get on the dog, and then they walk him off, and they'll go to the next bird. Well, two things are going to happen. A, his intensity is going to be down because he might be a little bit weaker, mentally dog.
Sure.
And their temperament's not going to handle that, disgust that you had with them. Or they're going to be greedy and they're going to, probably push it and or try and take it out. So, I mean, it's just like a kid. You don't ask them what 2 + 2 is and they say 6, and you don't go on to the next one. You work it out until they get it. So that's why I use multiple bird situations off of one point. The other reason for that is I'm preparing that dog for popcorn flushes when it comes time for sharp-tail or chicken hunting.
Yeah.
Because we've all had it where that dog goes on point and one bird lifts off, and you're like, you better not move because I know there's more there, right? Mm-hmm. And the other thing about that too is how many dogs do you see when they go on point and the bird flushes, they automatically let down. And where my dogs that I've trained, or my personal dogs, they don't let down because they know there's going to be more birds, right? So it's just teaching them to keep that intensity through that whole situation and after, because they never know when there's more birds. And, another odd thing that I shouldn't say it's odd. I say it's odd because most people look at me like I've got a third eye when I talk about it, but I do not teach whoa. I don't teach the word whoa. I think it adds too much negativity in and around birds because, I was taught it when I first, got involved in all these different organizations and training days and such, but you see it all the time where people teach the word whoa, and then they'll put them on either tile posts or trees or barrels or whatever. But mainly on what I see is training tables. And then they'll take these birds and put them on the training table, and the dog's standing there shaking, scared, and they let down, and you just lose that intensity. So I got away from that probably, trying to think how long I got away from that now. It's probably been 15 years since I haven't taught whoa to a dog. That doesn't mean that my dogs don't know whoa, but I don't teach it. I overlay it. I overlay the word whoa onto a steady dog.
Yeah.
And to simplify that for people, it's much like you teach a dog come, and then you overlay the whistle on top of it, right? It's just like, you know, I have three phases to my force breaking. There's hold and carry. I use the word fetch for all of it because I want to keep it simple. So I teach hold and carry, and then I do an ear pinch, and then I do an e-fetch. But I overlay the e-fetch on top of the ear pinch. So it's just like whoa, I'm overlaying the word whoa onto a steady dog. And like we talked about, I believe in having a statue on point through multiple birds. Once I overlay the word whoa on top, I want to say whoa and have my dog just kind of stand on its tippy toes and lean into it rather than, you know, put its tail down and its ears down and say, oh crap, I'm in trouble. You know, so I teach it very differently, or I shouldn't say teach, I overlay it, and I get a different result at the end of the day.
Well, I think the operative word in all of that was overlaying. So after the dog is being steady to your satisfaction, then they understand what the word is for, rather than the other way around, which is how, yes, a lot of people do it. And when I'm steadying them, I just give them a lot of praise for standing still and looking proud. And I just use a lot of praise. And then, you know, I slowly wean them in on the chase, and I just give them a lot of praise for standing there. And once they're standing there nice and proud and they're watching birds fly away, then I'm starting to overlay the word whoa onto them standing there. And the word whoa just kind of phases right in. It's much like teaching a dog lining drills. And you start out with the word fetch because that's what you force broke them with. And now you're going to start teaching them lining drills, you know, for, you know, 150, 200 yard lines, preparing for I do that before my utility testing. All my dogs have lining drills, but I switched from the word fetch to back. So I just start incorporating the word back into it and just overlaying that on top of that. So it's an overlay process that actually goes pretty smoothly. Yeah, I'll say it does. You've done a good job of that, and seems to be working. So I'm taking lots of notes here. That's Clyde Vetter with Sharpshooter's Kennel. I'm Scott Linden. This is the Upland Nation podcast. More from Clyde on, well, we're going to talk a little bit about retrieving. We're going to talk a little bit about hunting tips, and maybe a little bit more on introducing gunfire. It's all coming up in the second half of the podcast, as well as pad care my way. What I do to keep Flicks pads in shape. That's the Handle It segment. Clyde, relax for a moment. I'll be right back to you after this word from landtrust.com. Yeah, just settled on some dates, heading out to, I guess I'll call it East Central Montana. Maybe I'll see you there, Clyde. On another adventure on private land, an exclusive access situation. They all are like that. It's just like, you know, VRBO, Airbnb. You get it. You can make your reservation. You know you're going to be there. You know there's going to be nobody else there but you and your dog and a good friend or two. Open up a free account and shop around, and you'll be pleasantly surprised, number one, at the assortment, the variety, and the pricing. Landtrust.com. Get outdoors without the crowds. Landtrust.com. And the last time I saw Clyde was at the Purina World Headquarters, at least in the United States. We talked a lot about Purina products, including Pro Plan Sport dog food designed for active, hardworking dogs. And boy, did we get the education while we were there. Learned so much about how important research is. Nobody else is doing this stuff. Purina is. High protein, the right ratio of protein to fat. All of those things are carefully researched. They're constantly doing more research on sporting dogs. And hey, if you got a couch potato or two, they've got a formulation for them as well. Learn more at ProPlansport.com. And welcome back to the Upland Nation podcast. Scott Linden here, Clyde Vetter there. Clyde is with Sharpshooter's Kennels. And Clyde, what is it about? I mean, we talk all day about how many versatile champions you have, how many prize won utility dogs you have. What is your philosophy about testing excellence and how it relates to the rest of us schlubs who are out there to hunt?
Well, so, we've obviously, you all know that we've used the NAVDA system to judge our dogs. And the reason we picked that system, because we thought it was the most well-rounded for both waterfowl and upland. And I've had, many interesting conversations with, several other breeders or trainers throughout the years. And, with the NAVDA system, there's a lot of breeders that don't actually even tend to go on to the invitational level. And they believe more that the natural ability test is where it's at. And not that I disagree with them. I think the natural ability test has a lot to do with it. But I actually know what my dogs are made of at that point. I mean, I know what they're going to. So I personally use the invitational test as the guideline as to whether my dogs are capable of being bred or not. So obviously in the end, ultimately what I want is what I call an elite hunting dog. And I've always used that word in the elite hunting dog. And to me, an elite hunting dog is a dog that can go out and do almost anything out in the versatile dog world when it comes to bird hunting. And in order to achieve that, using the system that we have to get our dogs to that level has worked out very well for us and our clients. There's always a thing that a test dog ain't a good hunting dog or a good hunting dog ain't a good test dog. Well, I disagree with that. I think they can be an elite hunting dog that can do both. And so, yes, are there some dogs that are great hunting dogs but never will be a test dog? Absolutely. But I tend to just shy away from them because generally a lot of times they're lacking some mental stability as well. So the reason I prefer the invitational test for, the criteria of dogs being bred or not, and to build my database around my dogs is the thing about the invitational, and we see it all the time when you get out there and you watch these invitational dogs, and there's some of them you're like, gosh, how did that dog even make it to the invitational? How did they get that prize one? So we always look at those things because the dogs fall apart in the invitational test. What a lot of people aren't looking at is mental stability as well. So they're not looking at mental stability. The thing that I look at also is a dog that can go through that type of obedience training. Because granted, for the utility test with the duck search, we want all that independence. We're building that dog up. They're not having to run as a brace, So now we're adding in our brace. We're adding in all the double mark. We're adding in all the obedience part of the test for the invitational. And what happens is people start leaning on their dogs because they weren't taught to deal with correction at an early age. So they don't know how to deal with it, and then they start breaking them down. The other thing is dogs, when they start leaning on them for backing. So we teach our puppies to back. I mean, obviously puppies back. We've all seen little puppies, and when they're 5 to 8 weeks of age, when they're in the litter, and one will stop and be peeing, the other one will start pointing it. They have that instinct right from the get-go. Backing is just an extension of pointing. The problem with most people is they do not foster that as it's young. And then they qualify for the invitational like, oh my gosh, I got to start working backing. Well, you should have been doing that from like 4 months on and fostering that. So now they're putting all this pressure on the dog on backing and working as a team player. And they didn't do their lining drills prior to utility. So they're doing all that. So they're really breaking this dog down. So when it comes to the invitational, I'm looking at dogs that have the mental stability, the composure to maintain their style on point, their ability to maintain their field search through all that obedience training and that brace work and all the blind work and the doubles and the everything that's going on, the complexity of the invitational test. I'm looking at that dog's mental stability, their composure to maintain their style, which is pointing, to maintain their field search and their desire levels without breaking down. those are the things that I'm really looking for in a dog that I'm going to add into my breeding program.
I want to talk about mental stability a little bit more.
Yes. Do you need to know your limits and not do anything stupid? Absolutely. You need to watch the heat. You need to watch, am I overworking the dog? But that's all a big key part of it. And another thing, talking about dog food is when we're pushing dogs and it's hot out and we're having to work off a memory where there's 4 or 5 birds on the ground off of a point. Because granted, that can happen. If you're hunting with a buddy and you both shoot doubles, you got 4 birds on the ground. Now you want to be able to get them birds picked up quickly so you don't lose them. So it happens in hunting situations as well. But, I've had a lot of clients here that are feeding different dog foods, and you can tell the ones that are getting a good quality dog food like Purina, because those dogs can maintain their mental composure. They work off of memory better. And I know there's some that are going to think this is hogwash, but I know there's going to be some that actually believe it to be true because they've seen it. But I think that a good quality dog food with all the right nutrients for brain health as well, and then as well as I do that you were there for all of that brain health is a big thing that Purina studies. And that's where I think a good quality dog food helps as well when dogs start getting stupid hot. So it's a big key.
Oh, absolutely. I'm a believer, and even more so now that I listened to so many of those experts from the Purina side of things last week. Clyde, you talk about, I'll call it mental toughness. It's all the things that you talked about. Give me an example. You mentioned stepping on a puppy's toes, blah, blah, blah. But as a year-old dog, give me a real world example of how that might show itself.
Well, you might see it in different areas where, let's just take some water work when the dog starts getting tangled up in lily pads a little bit and they don't want to push through it, or like in a couple of the areas that we train, we have some muddy bog area and they hit that wall, right? And they give up easy because they're a little mentally weak and they don't believe that they can go through that, and they don't believe they can do it. So instead of them, when they give up like that, I may get in a boat in that situation and I'll get out there and I'll fire a shot. And if I have to, if I'm in the early stages of it, I may fire a shot and I'll throw just a winged bird that'll actually glide back in 20, 30 yards. They see that I fire a shot. Now I've gotten them all fired up, and there's a reason for them now to go through that. Mm-hmm. And once they get in there and they find they're able to chase that live bird and, track it down and catch it. And now it was all worth it. Right. So you got to give them a reason to go through that ugliness of that muck and all them heavy lily pads and everything. But what that does then is it just builds that mental toughness. Now the next time, they may go through it a little bit, struggle, and then come back out. And then by the third time, you're going to see them plow right through it because now they've learned the benefits of going through it and dealing with that muck for the reward at the end, right?
I had a baseball coach like that. He was an SOB, but we won the championship.
He pushed it, didn't he?
He did, and there's a fine line in there, and so what I'm thinking is we got to be real. We got to watch our dogs carefully, see how they react to virtually everything that happens.
Absolutely.
And then we can go just a little bit farther, but not too much farther.
Correct. You gotta know the limits of the dog and the conditions outside. Especially when it comes summertime for water work. And a lot of times people don't realize too that they may go and do water work thinking that it's hot outside, but don't realize that 2 foot of water with a black mucky bottom is going to be hot. And then much less when that dog gets in. I've actually recorded the temperature inside of cattails. And when it's hot like that and I'm working dogs and they come out, before I send them sometimes, I'll actually take a temp of the dog just to see where we're at. And that's how I learned to watch the dogs and at what level am I getting. And, so I did a lot of temps on dogs just to kind of learn, their behavior. Are they starting to overheat? And especially in the water, because I did a lot of tests that way is, can water work be as hard on them as running them in the field? And it can, because they remember they're in cattails where there's no air movement, especially if it's humid. It's like a sauna down in there. And if they're swimming around or running around in that, they're going to get just as hot, if not hotter. So I've actually done a lot of studies where I recorded their temps after like the first and second and third sends on ducks, and just watched how it would climb, and then say, okay, this is where we need to start stopping this at, and that's where I learned at what are the limits of the dogs. And just because you never want to get in trouble or watch a dog go through any kind of heat stroke or anything.
No, I just read a scary story about exactly that. We won't go there. That's Clyde Vetter. He's with Sharpshooters Kennels. I'm Scott Linden. This is the Upland Nation Podcast. Clyde, the other big priority for most of us is just getting a better retrieve. And we've talked around it a lot already. You mentioned a couple terms that you may or may not use sometimes. But just like our first segment talking about steadiness, take me from puppyhood to a more finished dog with the main points that you instill in a dog as you're working on retrieves.
Okay. So the main thing where all of our puppies get such a natural retrieve is you want to breed genetics into that natural retrieve. And then, so our puppies at about 3 weeks of age, when they're starting to play with each other and moving around, we actually put a bunch of little toys in with them of various types. I mean, a lot of people have seen our toy boxes for our puppies, and it's enormous. I mean, they have all kinds of little toys, but I could send you video after video where they're actually running around and playing keep away with all these objects, and it teaches them to carry objects. And when another puppy's tugging on it, it teaches them to hold it a little tougher and a little harder. And I actually, this is going to freak a lot of people out, but I actually do a little bit of tug of war with my puppies as well.
Okay.
Because it really ensures that grip on them. And, if I get a year-old, I'm going to jump the gun here a little bit. If I get a year or year and a half old dog in for training, and the guy doesn't want a force break, he just wants a hunting dog, and that dog does not like to retrieve, the first thing I'm going to do is pull out a rope toy, and I'm going to start playing tug of war with that dog. And it's amazing how I can bring out some of that natural retrieve instinct in that dog. And before I know it, I got them retrieving some birds as well. But back to the puppies, I'll play a little bit of that tug of war, and then I'll play a little keep away with them. But I have all these objects. And the other thing I've done is I've hung different stuffed toys with like legs and arms, like octopuses and monkeys and stuff. I hang them from the ceiling, and I keep them about, 3-4 inches off the ground. But the puppies can jump on it. And if you went to Sharpshooters Kennel Facebook page, you'd see all kinds of them down there in the section. But, they pull and tug on that, and it just brings out that natural instinct to retrieve, to where they want to attack something, they want to bring it back. And then we actually can take all of our puppies and take them out separately and throw a toy, and they'll run out and pick it up, and you can clap and praise them, and they'll bring it back to you. And I never take it away from them right away. I always let them hold it.
Yeah.
I praise them, tell them what a good pup they are, and then I'll throw it again. And I do it just 3 or 4 times. I don't want to bore them with it, and I don't want to get to a point to where they're not going to do it. I always want them wanting more, right?
Sure.
And so that's what we do there. And then actually, as I start doing duck drags and everything with my puppies at about 3 months. Actually, I got 3-month-old puppies where I've done duck drags, and they're dragging this duck back to me. But generally, I'll do smaller birds. Once they're old enough to carry ducks, I'll do them. So I'll start duck drags and everything, and chucker drags with them, around that 3-4 months of age. But while they're on birds too, once I start shooting some birds for them, as soon as they get that bird, I don't just stand there or walk towards them. I start walking away from them. And they will always want to bring it to you because they think you're going to lead them a little bit, and you're not going to play their game. So I just start walking away a little bit. And as soon as they start I'm praising them if they're running to me, and I'll kneel down then and have them come to me. But if they want to play a little keep away or play a game, I just start walking away, and inevitably they will always pick it up and come running to you because they know you're not going to play the game, and they think you're leaving. So they'll just run right to you. So I'm encouraging that behavior to bring it to me right away. And then I just give them a lot of praise for that. And, at about eight months of age, to a year, somewhere in there, as soon as I try and get them natural ability tested around that 6 to 7 month age range so that I can start my force breaking at about 8 months of age. And then I like to do I do the hold and carry, I do the ear pinch, and then I do an e-fetch overlay on top of the ear pinch. And then I start doing, I get into doing the V, and then I start doing the lining drills after that. So the V rope is where I put together all my heeling, the out and the back, and eliminate crating and everything. And then I start doing lining drills right away for my finished retrieve. So I'll get all my utility dogs before I even start doing duck searches, or right when I'm starting to do my duck searches. All my dogs are doing 150-yard lining drills, and then they'll also do, turn and go away from me as well for the lining drills. And it just helps make the duck search stuff go so much faster. But in a nutshell, that's pretty much it. And it's been a great program for us.
You use the term e-fetch. Why don't you clarify that for some of us? I can put 2 and 2 together, but often I get 5. So okay. What is that, and how you overlay it?
Yeah, so I work on the hold and carry. So let's face it, the most important thing that you can ever do in any of our dogs is hold and carry. And a lot of people use hold. I do not, because I don't want to complicate things for myself, because I see it all the time where people are always saying the wrong word. I use fetch for everything. I don't use the word hold. Hold and carry is the most important, because let's face it, all our dogs have enough prey drive to where they want that bird in their mouth. So they're generally always going to run out and put that bird in their mouth. It's after the bird's in their mouth where the problem comes in, and that's holding it and carrying it back to you.
Right.
So there's two things that come into play, and that's teaching them that they have to hold all objects and birds. And then also you got to have a good recall in place. So for most hunting dogs, I can get away with just doing a really good hold and carry process, and then a good recall and a swing and a heel. And until that dog gets super hot or just says, hey, I don't want to do this today, you don't have the insurance policy of the force braking part of it, which is the ear pinch or the e-fetch overlay. So that's where hold and carry you can get away with for just a hunting dog. The ear pinch is when we want that insurance policy, and then also if we're going to be doing lining drills, multiple retrieves where that dog's got to take a line, and for duck searches. But just to have that dog that's reliable, that's never going to drop a bird for when we're testing them, and or in tough hunting conditions when they're hot and through heavy, thick cover, that's where the finished program is going to come into play. So once the ear pinch and the dog's drive into objects, then we overlay the e-collar on top of them, the electronic training collar. And so that's what I call e-fetch, is if I'm overlaying the electronic simulation to mean the same thing as the ear pinch. And, but you got to make sure you have it overlaid properly so the dog truly understands that it means the same thing as the ear pinch.
So just give me an example of that, because I was thinking about that earlier today. I've done the same thing in a whole bunch of other commands as well, but there is a timing question about overlaying one version with the other. So most of us understand what an ear pinch is and what we're trying to do there. So the dog responds to the ear pinch.
Yeah. So once the dog's responding to the ear pinch, and every dog has different thresholds as far as, how much you have to apply. But once that dog's driving to the end of the table with it, you can pretty much guarantee, and I'm saying now picking up multiple objects and also multiple dead birds of different kinds. And then I actually go into live birds. Well, I'll secure a duck or a chucker, and they're alive and moving around, and they have to pick up all of that as well. And then once they're doing all of that reliably, then I'll take that dog, and you no longer have to apply the pressure that you did with the ear pinch. Now I'm just actually kind of massaging the ear. And so it's easier for some people to actually put the e-collar buttons between their finger, put the ear between their finger and the e-collar buttons. That tends to make a lot of sense for people, because when they're you always want to make sure. So you got to think about when you're training, timing is everything. So I always tell people your timing's got to be, you're going to make a correction when they're thinking about doing something wrong, not once they've did it, because your timing is essential. So when you're applying pressure to the ear because you're pushing the button, you always want to let off about a foot, or, depending on the person, I'll say you have to let off 3 feet before the object, so there's no pressure once they get their mouth on it. The next person might be a foot before it, because by the time somebody's brain tells their fingers to let off the button, everybody's comprehension of that and or their timing is very differently. So I'll change it per client, right? Or somebody that I'm helping. So I'll say, hey, you need to let off a little sooner because your brain's not comprehending the timing of the dog as fast as they're running, so I'll adjust it therefore. But that's an easy way to do it, is just put the dog's ear between your finger and the button. And, another way I do it, I just keep the transmitter in my right hand. As the dog's coming up, I just grab the ear a little bit, and all I got to do is just kind of massage the ear. And I start out at very low levels. I always start out on low one. A Garmin Pro 550 is the absolute best to use for this, because I use a walkie-talkie when I'm training, I use a walkie-talkie with all of my clients, because on number 7 on a walkie-talkie, or I shouldn't say a walkie-talkie, a CB radio, a number 7, channel 7 on a CB radio emits the signal from the e-collar. I carry that all the time, so I can check I watch my clients' timing all the time, and I'm like, you need to let off sooner. And let's say I did. I'm like, no, you didn't. I'm listening right here. I can tell everything. And I use that in the field too. But so that's where I listen to their timing. I can tell when they have pressure on, when they don't. I catch them lying all the time, and that's how we make them better is by me watching them train. But yeah, as they're coming up on the table, I grab the ear, give stimulation, and I start off on low ones, and then I'll graduate to medium ones, and then I'll do kickers. So I developed kickers. Oh gosh, that's probably got to be, I was actually prototyping with Tritronics when I started all that. And kickers, it's similar to stick fetching in the retriever world, but kickers is what I start out with is a low, and then I'll hit the high button, and it goes from low to high. So if you hold your finger on the low button and then hit the high button, the e-collar, and this is only the Garmin Pros, it will go from a low to a high. And then if you need to, you can also let off of that high button and stay on the low, and it'll go back down from high to low. You can do the same from a medium to high, but I call them kickers. And what it does is it eases that dog into a little bit higher level without them getting that kind of stark jump. We've all seen it, right? So that's where I do a lot of kickers on my force breaking and my e-fetch work. And then on my lining drills is I do a lot of kickers where I start out on a low and I do a low, high, and then I'll let off. So it gives them a low and it's a high, and then I'll let off the pressure, and it graduates them into a little bit higher level. But I'll work every dog up to where I get that same amount of push and drive that I did with the ear pinch. And then I can carry that out into the V and then down into lining drills as well.
Whew.
and I'm skipping a whole bunch of stuff in between, but we don't have the time.
No, because now I want to talk about the most fun, and that is hunting itself. We got a great dog. Hopefully it's a sharpshooter dog, and we're in the field, and hopefully it's on a sharp-tail prairie somewhere, and hey, maybe a chicken shows up too. What are some of the things that you've seen, people like us do that we probably should avoid doing? And what should we do more of that we probably don't?
Oh, boy, that's a tough question. Are we talking when it comes to hunting?
Hunting or dogs,
Well, I guess some of the things, like a good friend of mine told me once, experience is what you get when you didn't get what you wanted. So the key to that is, when it comes to dog training and or even hunting, don't be afraid to make mistakes. I see so many people when they're training or even hunting, they're afraid to make mistakes. They're afraid to take that challenge or that leap. What's the worst thing that can happen is you fail. And that's one thing Marilyn said she's always admired about me is I'm not afraid to fail. I'm the first one that's going to, try something. And if it was wrong or if it didn't work, big deal. I'll figure it out, And so that's my advice to everybody is just don't be afraid to fail or do something wrong. These dogs are so resilient. and they're so forgiving these days. I mean, it's amazing how far dogs have come just in the last 20 years that you have to really do something stupid to screw them up. So just don't be afraid to fail or do something wrong. And you'll never know what to do right until you've done it wrong. So that's how you learn. That's how you become a better dog trainer. I mean, I have not read a single training book yet. I just go out and I try it, and I try different things until it works with that dog. And that's how I've learned to have so many, there's no one way to train a dog. And so that's where you got to have so many different techniques and so many things available to you that you can try. But that only comes from just experimenting and thinking outside the box.
Speaking of mistakes, and we all make them, and many of us make them when we're introducing gunfire, give me a capsule direction on how to introduce that.
It's amazing how I still hear, I had 2 of them this year where they said, I just took my pup to the gun range when I was shooting sporting clays, and we just tied him up there. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that is like the worst thing you can do. So, I always prefer that this is where I do things a little differently. So this is do as I say, not as I do. So if I have a client's dog that comes in for training, I'm always going to start out with a cap pistol. I'm going to always get that pup driving on birds, chasing birds, getting real fired up around birds. And once they're out there running and maybe have their mind focused on a bird that they're chasing, say they pointed it and then I flushed it and they're chasing it, I'm going to put the cap pistol down to the ground, muff a little bit. I'm going to start out with cap pistols and slowly work in as I'm going to work in a little closer and fire in a little sooner, and then graduate into a shotgun pointed the other way. Once I see that there's no issues, I'm going to start shooting birds. For my personal dogs that I have raised and that I'm keeping for a breeding program, that's where I do things a little differently. So mind you, I raise my puppies very differently. They're around a lot of noise. I'll take soap bottles and soda bottles and like shampoo bottles and things like that. I'll bang them on the floor and they all come running to me. I have a lot of their toys actually make a lot of noise. I have an old bear that was mine when I was like 3 years old that you pull it and it makes a bunch of noise and it rolls. And I tell you, the first time they kind of touched that and hit it, they all step back a little bit and like, oh my God, what was that noise? And within a week, they're all jumping on it. And you have like 8 or 9 puppies like jumping on it. It's making all this noise and they're chasing it. And it's just like fun. Noise becomes fun.
Yeah.
So for a dog that I've raised, and I'm going to use it for my breeding program, I generally just jump right into firing a shotgun at a off direction. And when I see there's no issues, I finally start shooting right over them right away. But again, in my breeding program, I'm looking for the toughest of the tough, right? When it comes to mental stability. But if it's a client's dog, and I always recommend to my clients because they don't have the experience that I do, I highly recommend everybody start out with a cap pistol and gradually work into a shotgun, because you don't want to make a silly mistake that can hinder you for the rest of the dog's life. So that's just, how I practice it and preach it.
How about gear? If we run into each other in Montana, what are you going to have in your hunting vest that we probably should carry and don't? Well,
I think Marilyn already told you that my hunting vest is loaded to the hilt. In fact, I'm trying to get I run a Wingworks vest, and I want to work with Matt and I have a vest here from Matt, but I want to work with Matt and build something just that fits, that works for me a little bit better, because I tend to carry some extra stuff. So some things that I'm going to probably have in my game bag that you don't is a hot call.
Yeah.
You probably don't have a hot call in your bag.
How do you use it, by the way?
Well, it depends on, sometimes I've found it to work at times and I've not found it to work at other times. But so sometimes if you can get into some birds and they covey and they just pop and they don't go very far, you can use a hot call to get them to settle in a little bit or maybe hold a little tighter.
Yeah.
Like I said, I've had, it's always been in my game bag, and I don't know why I keep moving it from game bag to game bag, but it's been there forever, and I've used it at times and I found it to really work. And then other times I've wanted to throw it away.
Yeah. I had a good friend, a Montana pro guide, who said and I'm a believer too. sometimes. He said, yeah, when hawks are hunting, they don't use their call.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that there's still some value in it.
Yeah, like I said, I've used it occasionally, and there's times I've seen it work, but a lot of times I don't even remember I have it there. But I find that if I find that birds are super jumpy, I may pull it out and try it, and that's when I maybe found it to work a little bit. But yeah, I mean, obviously we carry Benadryl for snake bites. We're carrying some antivenom in the truck now. And, we carry I carry a whole first aid kit in my back for both humans and dogs, tourniquets, you name it. And another thing that I carry is a big sensing plier. And the one that actually I've been able to downsize the weight of it is I've spent the money and get a good Knipix. It's Knipix, and you can get them off of Amazon. But Knipix makes some really good cable cutters, and I think those are essential. I've seen dogs hung up on barbed wire fences. I also want to have something like that, just in case they get into like a snare. But I've actually ran across the prairies, and I'm sure you've seen it too, where there's this whole big bundle of wire laying there. Yeah. And, I've seen some dogs get, collar caught in it or whatever, because they're running through the grass and they can't catch it. And then as soon as they start freaking out and flipping around, so I always want to have a good wire cable cutter in my pouch. That's a necessity there. That's something that you have to carry.
Yeah, and a lot of people will say, "Oh, I carry a pair of dikes, side cutters."
That don't work.
Nope. Let me just reiterate that it won't.
Yep.
It won't cut that snare wire.
Yep, and that's where those Knipix really come in handy. And I've tried 3 or 4 of them to figure out which one works the best. And then I got one that had a little bit longer handle from Maryland, just so she'd have a little more leverage. Obviously men can be a little bit stronger than women sometimes, but I know I could easily get beat up by some of them once in a while too. But yeah, I just needed something that had a little more leverage for her. So I got a little bit longer handled one, but yeah, Knipix has some really, really good ones. But yeah, I carry a full first aid kit, and then a human, kit as well for, like if there's a shotgun wound or something like that. Yeah. I think the one of the main things that I've carried now ever since Garmin came out with it is InReach. Yeah. And, I have the InReach Mini that I have on my vest at all times. And you can actually get the Alphas now with the InReach built right into them as well. But I think the InReach is also a necessity. I mean, God forbid any of us would ever have a shotgun wound or, anything like that. But if you need to get to the emergency room quick, having that SOS there is a handy thing for sure.
Clyde, you bring up a point that a lot of people don't believe. I write for a lot of magazines that are kind of on the fringes of what we do, more civilized stuff. And those readers, to a great degree, for example, don't know there are still places where there is no cell phone signal. Right.
Yeah. Gosh, when we hunt Merns country, when we're down in Merns country down in Arizona, I mean, there's nothing there. And that's where, so Marilyn and I both have the InReaches. And then now the 300 eyes, you can watch where your friends are, your buddies, if you're hunting with them and their dogs. But yeah, having that InReach there. And too, when we go mule deer hunting, there's a lot of times we don't have any signal when you're down in valleys and stuff. And I know one friend, it saved his life once. He fell down in a creek when he was bear hunting, and he had to use it. And thank God he had it, But no, it's a necessity, I think. But I always get a little bit. I go a little overboard when it comes to safety and having enough stuff in my pack. But everybody always says they want to hunt with me because they know I'm going to take care of them if something happens, But it just, I'd rather be prepared than have something happen. I'd rather be prepared and have nothing happen than something happen and not be prepared.
Absolutely. I'm a Boy Scout from way back and still a believer in that very slogan. That's Clyde Vetter with Sharpshooter's Kennel. I'm Scott Linden. This is the Upland Nation podcast. Clyde, we could talk all day, but we'll save it for the next one. We'll cover a whole bunch of more new ground then, and we'll probably have a debrief on our sharptail season as well.
Absolutely.
I learned a lot. I'm sure everybody else did too. Thank you so much for being a part of the Upland Nation podcast.
thank you, and best of luck to everybody this hunting season and to the rest of your training season. And I know a lot of people are getting ready to test their dogs coming this fall. In fact, our test is this weekend, but good luck to everybody who's running, and keep up the hard work. Always look forward and keep striving to be better, and good things will come.
Thanks. Have a great day.
All right. You too, Scott.
And the rest of you, stay right where you are. We're going to talk about pad care my way and how important that will become in the next few weeks and the next few months of our season. It's all coming up after this word from HiVizSites.com. You know, I was reminded again, especially in bad weather, again, based on the premise that your head, your mind has to be able to create a relationship between your shotgun muzzle and the flying target, whether it's made out of clay or it's covered in feathers. In bad weather, that's even harder. But because of the interlocking light pipes in various colors, you can switch out to the color you need most. Just like, you know, some shooters will change the color of their shooting glasses lens when weather conditions require it. You can do the same with these interlocking light pipes from HiVizSites.com. That way you never defeat the relationship between the shotgun muzzle and the moving target. Learn more about how that works and watch my video on the subject at HiVizSites.com, HiVizSites.com. And take care of your guns now and throughout the season with SageandBreaker.com. Crafted at the highest caliber, lifetime warranty on all of their hard goods, and some of the best photographs on Facebook. Thank you, Fred, for brightening our day so often. SageandBreaker.com is a company that makes high-quality gun cleaning products and accessories. Yeah, protect your shotgun for the life of your shotgun and your hunting career. Products that help you get the most out of hunting. Sign up for the mailing list at SageandBreaker.com. Well, this week on the Handle It segment, this topic came up again recently on one of those factory tours I was on in the last couple of weeks. One of my friends is preparing for a long hunt, not in what I would call wicked country, well, except for the wolves, but was concerned about his dog's pads. And he said, you have any thoughts? I said, do I? You got a minute? So let me tell you what I told him. And some of you have heard this before. I apologize. But it's always good to get a refresher course on taking care of your dog's wheels. Because if he can't drive, you can't hunt. All right. Close your eyes. Imagine two hands open. You got a dry, brittle leaf in one, you got a green, fresh leaf in the other. Close your hands into a tight fist and open them up again. The dry, brittle leaf is now a bunch of little pieces crunched up and fallen apart. The green one has responded by being resilient, opening back up, flexible, and ready to go. Yeah. Or if you're a guitar player or you work with your hands a lot, you know, you get calluses on your hands, and poor dogs on their pads, that's what they get, the same thing. We're turning their pads into calluses when we toughen them up, so to speak. You know what happens, especially guitarists in the crowd there. Eventually those calluses come off and you have to start over again. Well, that's what happens when your dog's pads peel. So I had a revelation a few years back, and I thought, well, you know, toughening a dog's pads only leads to them peeling off because it's scar tissue. So I started a different approach. I keep my dog's pads supple and resilient. I use a product called ProFoot Heel Rescue. It's a human product, but it just happened to be the first thing I found when I was looking for this, and it's worked for me. Any kind of lotion, moisturizing lotion, if you will, goes on to Flicks pads every couple days during the off season, and then we'll get into the season in a moment. It creates a supple, resilient pad so that when he hits something that might, be sharp or an abrupt edge of some sort, the pad curves around it and springs back. The key to this and to everything I do with my dog's pads is you got to put it everywhere. On the pads, on the obvious surfaces, then between the pads, and then up on the top where the nails meet the pads. Cover everything, including that carpal pad, that's their thumb, if you will. Keep those things moisturized and supple at all times. And then every day before a hunt, I treat Flick's pads with some sort of a pad conditioner. And there's a bunch of them out there. I like Happy Jack Pad Coat. It's got a couple things in there that are a little different than everybody else's formula. And Pad Coat is Padkote, Happy Jack Pad Coat. And then at the end of every hunt day, more of that Pro Foot Heel Rescue. Those are the things that work for me. The dog's feet are supple, resilient. The dogs really love it at the end of the day when you put that moisturizer back on. Oh man, it must feel, imagine, maybe you ought to do it for your own feet too. Anyway, that's how I do it. It seems to work. We haven't had any problems, knock wood, in the last 4 or 5 seasons. And I attribute all of that to this regimen that I perform on Flick's feet. Hope that helps, and have a great season. Handle It is brought to you this week by PointerShotguns.com. Yeah, hey, 72 days to the quail opener in Missouri. Good luck, Adam. Good luck, Matt. I hope you guys have a good one. It's November 1st. I don't know how I could wait that long. Luckily, I don't have to. PointerShotguns.com is where you can shop for your next shotgun. And it's not too late, especially if you're in Missouri, for example. All sorts of finishes, every single bore size and gauge, semi-auto, over and under, side-by-side, blued, case-colored, Cerakoted. Your first stop for an upgrade, no matter where you're going from and to. Learn more at PointerShotguns.com. Well, thank you so much, Clyde Vetter, for sharing your wisdom with us. Boy, you got me to thinking about a bunch of stuff, and I'm sure other people would like to know more. Sharpshooterskennel.com. And thank you if you left a rating or a review. Sure appreciate that. It is working. We continue to grow, and it's all because you keep saying nice things about the Upland Nation podcast. And those things are fueled by sponsor support from Sage and Breaker, Purina Pro Plan Sport, ESP America, Mid-Valley Clays, TrulockChokes, Midway USA, LandTrust.com, Pointer Shotguns, and HiViz Shooting Systems. Yeah, counting down the days. Hope you are too. I am Scott Linden. Thank you so much for being a part of the Upland Nation.